When speaking about tyranny, most Chinese are reminded of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of the Qin dynasty, whose oppressive court burned philosophy books and buried Confucian scholars alive. Qin Shi Huang's harsh treatment of his people came from his policy of supporting his rule with all of the resources under heaven. His policy had four main aspects: excessively heavy taxation, wasting human labor for projects designed to glorify him, brutal torture under harsh laws, punishing even the offender's family members and neighbors, and controlling people's minds by burning books and killing scholars. Today, the CCP's violence and abuse are even more severe than those of the tyrannical Qin dynasty. Mao Zedong, the first CCP leader of the People's Republic of China, put it bluntly, saying, "What can Emperor Qin Shi Huang brag about? He only killed 460 Confucian scholars, but we killed 46,000 intellectuals." There are people who accuse us of practicing dictatorship like Emperor Qin Shi Huang, and we admit it all. It fits the reality. It is a pity that they did not give us enough credit, so we need to add it ourselves. Let us take a look at China's arduous 55 years under the rule of the CCP. Let us examine how, after seizing power, the CCP utilized the state apparatus to carry out genocide of entire classes of society by using the principle of class struggle, and how the CCP has achieved its reign of terror by means of violent revolution. On October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong declared, standing on the rostrum of Tiananmen, that the CCP had seized power through violent revolution. Having suffered several decades of war, the Chinese people celebrated at this moment, thinking that the Chinese nation would move to prosperity thereafter. Throughout history, there have been political groups that committed mass murder in bloody wars in order to acquire power. But after their gaining power, large-scale killings usually came to an end, and people could live a normal life of peace and stability. The Chinese people did not expect that for the CCP. Seizing power was only the first step in the 10,000-mile march. What followed was the CCP evil spirits' tight possession of the country and people, manipulating and controlling people so as to maintain power while monopolizing and absorbing the wealth of society. Therefore, from the day that the CCP came to power, it started a series of organized and planned struggles, both internally and externally, such as the class struggle, the path struggle, and the ideological struggle, through which to systematically eliminate dissidents in various strata and groups on the one hand, and extend the party organization to the smallest unit of society on the other. The CCP not only annihilates people's physical bodies, but also destroys their spirits and suppresses all thoughts and beliefs that do not fit with the Communist Party. By forcing the people in the country to become obedient slaves of its tyrannical rule, the CCP attempts to reach its goal of absolute social control. Barely 3 months after the founding of Communist China, the CCP started a land reform program. Rural residents were classified into different classes and categories, and over 20 million rural inhabitants nationwide were labeled landlords, rich peasants, reactionaries, or bad elements. These new outcasts faced discrimination, humiliation, and loss of all their civil rights. The party slogan, "Land to the Tiller," indulged the selfish side of the landless peasants, encouraged them to struggle with the landowners by whatever means, and to disregard the moral implications of their actions. With the goal of eliminating the landlord class during the land reform, nearly 100,000 landlords were killed. In certain areas, the CCP and the peasants killed the landlords' entire families. Even women and children could not escape the murder. Meanwhile, as the land reform extended its reach to remote areas and regions of ethnic minorities, the CCP's organizations also expanded quickly, establishing party committees and branches in every township and village. These local branches worked to pass instructions from the CCP Central Committee and were at the front line of the class struggle. During this period, the CCP launched its first wave of propaganda, declaring, "Chairman Mao is the great savior of the people, and that only the CCP can save China." During land reform, the landless farmers got what they wanted through the CCP's policy of reaping without laboring and robbing without concern for the means. Poor peasants felt that they had benefited from following the party. Therefore, they were grateful and accepted the CCP propaganda that the party worked for the interests of the people. But the good days of land to the tiller were short-lived. In September of 1951, Mao Zedong proposed the first national meeting on cooperatives. Although field investigation showed that peasants did not have enthusiasm in forming cooperatives, the party branches at various levels of the government, including township, rural town, and village, still promoted the cooperatives as the party's political goal. They imposed a number of practices on the peasants, such as mutual aid groups, primary cooperatives, advanced cooperatives, and people's communes. Using the slogan of criticizing women with bound feet, meaning those who are slow-paced, the CCP drove and pushed, year after year, urging peasants to dash into socialism.
乡亲们，咱们芳草地这2年的风风雨雨，给大伙擦亮了眼睛。不搞互助合作，就是死路一条啊！咱们贫下中农要按照毛主席的指示组织起来，奔社会主义，这才是一条金光大道啊！
By the end of 1952, over 8.3 million cooperatives sprang up in China's rural areas. By the end of 1956, almost all peasants had joined cooperatives. In the cooperative movement, the collective now took the land, livestock, and agricultural tools, which became the property of the collective, and all the benefits the peasants had received during the land reform were taken away. The Communist Party soon started to exercise central control over buying and selling of grain, cotton, and oil, excluding key agricultural products from market exchange. This, in addition to the system of residency registration, led to the peasants' total loss of freedom. Peasants could not leave their commune and brigade, could not go into the cities to work or live, could not buy grain from the state grain shop, and their children could not go to school in the city. The peasants' children could only be peasants. China's rural residency holders became second-class citizens from this time on. During the Great Famine of 1959 to 1961, peasants did not even have the right to enter the city to beg for food. And with their path of escape totally blocked, tens of millions of peasants died of hunger. This was a frightening tragedy, unprecedented in the history of human civilization. In the recent era of economic reform, while a number of people have become rich, the 900 million peasants only have had their income increased slightly, and their social status improved somewhat in the initial 5 years after the household contract system replaced people's communes. Due to the CCP price structure that favored industrial commodities over agricultural goods, as well as the heavy tax burden, peasants soon plunged into poverty once again. Data from Xinhua news agency shows that since 1997, the revenue of the major grain production areas and the income of most rural households have been at a standstill or even declined, while rural local government imposed increasingly heavier taxes and fees. The income gap between the urban and rural population has drastically increased, and economic disparity continues to widen. Peasants who have entered the city as wage laborers receive the lowest pay and are deprived of any welfare benefits their urban counterparts enjoy. Behind the shiny, display-style economy are hidden layers of ruthless exploitation of peasants and blatant violation of their survival rights. The CCP relied on the peasants to gain power, but today it is the peasants who sacrifice the most and pay the dearest cost in the Chinese society. The CCP's rural policies have always aimed at maintaining party control instead of representing the peasants and showing concern for their benefit. During reforms in industry and commerce that started in the early 1950s, the CCP claimed that the capitalist class and the working class were different in nature. The former was the exploiting class, while the latter was the non-exploiting and anti-exploiting class. According to this logic, the capitalist class was born to exploit and would not stop doing so until it perished. It could only be eliminated, not reformed. Under such a premise, the CCP used both killing and brainwashing to transform capitalists and merchants. The CCP used the method of supporting the obedient and destroying those who disagreed. If you surrendered your assets to the state and supported the CCP, you were considered just a minor problem among the people. If you disagreed with or complained about the CCP's policy, you would be labeled a reactionary and become the target of the CCP's draconian dictatorship. During the reign of terror that accompanied these reforms, capitalists and business owners all surrendered their assets. Many of them could not bear the humiliation they faced and committed suicide. Chen Yi, then mayor of Shanghai, asked every day, "How many paratroopers did we have today?" referring to the number of capitalists who had committed suicide by jumping from the tops of buildings that day. Thus, in only a few years, the CCP completely eliminated private ownership in China.
1月15日，北京市率先宣布进入社会主义。北京各界20多万人在天安门广场集会，庆祝社会主义改造胜利完成。
While carrying out its land and industrial reform programs, the CCP launched many massive movements, such as the suppression of counter-revolutionaries, thought reform campaigns, cleansing the anti-CCP clique headed by Gao Yong and Rao Shushi, probing Hu Feng's counter-revolutionary group, the 3 Anti-campaign, the 5 Anti-campaign, and the further cleansing of counter-revolutionaries.
薄一波同志明确地指出了反贪污、反浪费、反官僚主义运动的性质、方针和政策。
反贪污、反浪费、反官僚主义的斗争，本质上就是反对资产阶级腐化暴露思想的斗争。
The CCP used these movements to persecute countless innocent people. In every political movement, the CCP fully utilized its control of government resources in conjunction with the party's committees, branches, and sub-branches. 3 party members would form a small combat team, infiltrating all villages and neighborhoods. These combat teams were ubiquitous, leaving no stone unturned. This deeply entrenched party control network, inherited from the CCP's network of party branches installed within the army during the war years, has since played a key role in later political movements.
不久以前，这里还是一片废墟，现在几千工人在高空和地下日夜不停地工作着，他们的劳动和智慧迅速地改变着鞍钢的面貌。
Even the workers, named by the CCP as a class that leads all others, could not escape the fate of being fooled and deprived. While promising to protect them in illness, old age, and death, the CCP has maintained a system of low wage for workers. Old generation workers have hardly had any health insurance or savings for old age. After the Cultural Revolution, the CCP transferred the economic problems caused by its own policy mistakes onto the workers. In the name of economic reform, the CCP took away all welfare promises to the workers. After the CCP sold out state enterprises, one round after another, countless workers lost their jobs. As medical service became commercialized after the government relinquished its responsibility to society, workers dared not visit hospitals when they were ill. After old age care was dumped onto society, old workers who live on their meager retirement income barely have enough money to buy food. In this process of workers' deterioration, however, the CCP leaders at various levels have converted state property into their own. After the bloody transfer of private property to the public in the early years, now we have a similarly bloody transfer of public property into private hands. These 2 crimes, opposite in nature, have both been committed by the CCP in just 50 years. In 1950, the CCP instructed its local governments to ban all unofficial religious faiths and secret societies, stating that those feudalistic underground groups were mere tools in the hands of landlords, rich farmers, reactionaries, and the special agents of the KMT. In the crackdown that extended to all townships and cities of China, the government dismissed Christian, Catholic, and Taoist and Buddhist organizations, labeling them superstitious. The CCP ordered all members of these churches, temples, and religious societies to register with government agencies and to repent for their involvement. Failure to do so would mean severe punishment. In 1951, The government formally promulgated regulations threatening that those who continued their activities in unofficial religious groups would face a life sentence or the death penalty. This movement persecuted a large number of kind-hearted and law-abiding believers in God. The available statistics indicate that the CCP persecuted at least 3 million religious believers and underground group members, some of whom were killed. The CCP searched almost every household across the nation and interrogated its members, even smashing statues of the kitchen god that Chinese peasants traditionally worshipped. The executions reinforced the CCP message that communist ideology was the only legitimate ideology and the only legitimate faith. The concept of patriotic believers soon emerged. The state constitution protected only patriotic believers. The reality was, whatever religion one believed in, there was only one criterion. You had to follow the CCP instructions, and you had to acknowledge that the CCP was above all religions. If you were a Christian, the CCP was the god of the Christian God. If you were a Buddhist, the CCP was the Master Buddha of the Master Buddha. Among Muslims, the CCP was the Allah of the Allah. When it came to the living Buddha in Tibetan Buddhism, the CCP would intervene and itself choose who the living Buddha would be. The CCP left you no choice but to say and do what the CCP demanded you to say and do. All believers were forced to carry out the CCP objectives while upholding their respective faiths in name only. Failing to do so would make one the target of the CCP persecution and dictatorship. Over 20,000 Christians conducted a survey among 560,000 Christians in house churches in 207 cities in 22 provinces in China. They found that, among house church attendees, 130,000 were under government surveillance. By 1957, the CCP had killed over 11,000 religious adherents and arbitrarily arrested and extorted money from many more. By eliminating the landlord class and the capitalist class, and by persecuting large numbers of God-worshipping and law-abiding people, the CCP cleared the way for communism to become the all-encompassing religion of China. In 1956, a group of Hungarian intellectuals formed the Petofi Circle that held debates critical of the government. The group sparked a nationwide revolution in Hungary, which was crushed by Soviet soldiers. Mao Zedong took this Hungarian event as a lesson. In 1957, the CCP used the slogan, "Letting 100 flowers blossom and 100 schools of thought contend," and called upon Chinese intellectuals and other people to help the CCP rectify itself. Mao's purpose was to lure out the anti-party elements among the people. In his letter to provincial party chiefs in 1957, Mao Zedong revealed his intention of luring the snakes out of their holes by letting them air their views freely. The CCP encouraged people to speak up and promised no reprisals. The party would not grab pigtails, strike with sticks, issue hats, or settle accounts after the autumn, meaning the party would not find fault, make attacks, place labels, or seek to retaliate. Yet soon, the CCP initiated an anti-rightist movement, declaring 550,000 people as rightists. 270,000 lost their jobs, and 230,000 were labeled medium rightists or anti-CCP, anti-socialist elements.
这是一场要不要社会主义、要不要共产党领导的斗争，这是一场关系到全国人民生死存亡的斗争。
Some summarize the CCP political strategy of persecution into 4 items: luring the snakes out of their holes, fabricating crimes, sudden attack, and punishment with a single accusation, relentless attack in the name of saving people, and forcing self-criticism and using the most severe labels. What then were the reactionary speeches that had caused so many rightists and anti-communists to be exiled for nearly 30 years in far-flung corners of the nation? The 3 major reactionary theories, the targets of general and intensive assaults at the time, consisted of a few speeches by Luo Longji, Zhang Bozhen, and Chu Anping. Let us take a closer look at their opinions and suggestions. Luo Longji suggested forming